the Vice President and Texas Governor John Conley applaud President Kennedy's entrance as he returns to his hotel for a breakfast with the Fort Worth Chamber of Commerce. Mrs. Kennedy's entrance draws another comment from the President.
2 years ago, I said that, introduced myself in Paris by saying that I was the man who had accompanied Mrs. Kennedy to Paris. I'm getting that same sensation as I travel around Texas. Nobody wonders what Lynda and I wear, but we'll...
The President's car is now turning onto Elm Street, and it will be only a matter of minutes before he arrives at the trademark. I was on Simmons Freeway earlier, and even the freeway was jam-packed with spectators waiting their chance to see the President as he made his way towards the trademark. It appears as though something has happened in the motorcade route. Something, I repeat, has happened in the motorcade route. There's numerous people running up the hill alongside Elm Street, there by the Simmons Freeway. Several police officers are rushing up the hill at this time. Stand by just a moment, please. Something has happened in the motorcade route. Stand by, please. Parkland Hospital, there has been a shooting. Parkland Hospital.
The torch has been passed to a new generation of Americans born in this century, tempered by war, disciplined by a hard and bitter peace, proud of our ancient heritage, and unwilling to witness or permit the slow undoing of those human rights to which this nation has always been committed and to which we are committed today at home and around the world.
In September of 1966, it appeared that President Johnson had gone back to the campaign trail for the steady long haul towards the month of November. In the wings, experts of every description, politicians, pundits, cartoonists, and sociologists, stood waiting to exhaustively dissect, examine, or make predictions about one of America's great institutions and one of its great imponderables, the off-year elections. Then, as the campaign moved into its final 50 days, and few could agree on any early estimate of its final outcome, the world was suddenly and dramatically reapprised of the aspirations of other men. Men whose depth of awareness and total commitment to a new dream might one day reshape the destiny of an entire frontier. Their beginning success would hinge upon the reactions and convictions of the President of the United States. In Sydney, the welcomes at Canberra, Wellington, and Melbourne were eclipsed, as over 1,250,000 Australians lined the route of the presidential motorcade. Less than 3 hours after his visit to Los Banos, the president's scheduled tour of the island of Corregidor was suddenly cut short. American ships on the South China Sea were put on alert. The news wires in the city of Saigon went dead, and a covering force of jet fighters slipped in beside Air Force One as she began an unscheduled flight toward mainland Asia. Twilight on a sultry strip of steel runway in South Vietnam.
I came here today for one good reason. Simply because I just could not come to this part of the world and not come to see you.
Some of the oldest words never seem to grow old. And among them are these: gallantry above and beyond the call of duty. 15 months ago, Sergeant Robert Emmett O'Malley did more than fight for honor. In a place of great danger, he ignored danger. Wounded, he refused to consider his own safety. At the risk of his own life, he shielded other men's lives. Today, I will give him the highest medal his nation can offer.
The Gulf of Aqaba was an international waterway. All nations have the right of free and innocent passage. With the maritime powers uniting in a common front, they hoped to challenge the Egyptian blockade of the Strait of Tehran. All in all, it was a gamble against time. And time, Prime Minister Wilson declared, is not on our side. The President received the first word of the fighting at 4 o'clock in the morning, the 5th of June. In the Situation Room of the White House, the all-too-familiar maps of Southeast Asia had been replaced with those of the Eastern Mediterranean. The President had bent every effort for 2 weeks to avert hostilities. And now that diplomacy had given way to war, his one compelling task was to contain it, to tamp it out. The team had been assembled, men for whom foreign affairs have long since become a way of life. And as one columnist observed, for whom foreign crises have become the coin of daily living. As the war progressed, false charges would be made attempting to brand the United States and Great Britain as active participants.
Glad to meet with Chairman Kosygin this morning. We talked throughout the day quietly and straightforwardly with him. And I'm glad to say to you that I've found that he came to our meeting in the same spirit. We talked about the problems of the Middle East in detail, and we shall continue to talk about them. We talked about the problems of Southeast Asia. We've talked about the arms race and about the need for new agreements there. We talked about the need for common action on constructive initiatives for peace. We reached no new agreements, almost but not quite. But new agreements are not always reached in a single conversation. So we're going to eat lunch and spend Sunday together again at Hollybush.
The first day of the summit talks was over. But for the President, there was still much work to do. After assuring the thousands of enthusiastic onlookers that the meeting had been a very good and useful one, he bid a momentary goodbye to his historic guest. This was the 25-hour day. He had been on the go since 4:30 in the morning, and he had 5,000 miles and 12 more hours to burn before there would be any rest. It would be difficult to pinpoint any moment in Lyndon Johnson's political career as satisfying as this 23rd day of June 1967. He had fired the imagination of the public with the sudden bold moves that led to the face-to-face encounter at Glassboro. At a $500 a plate dinner for the President's Club of Los Angeles, he was able to announce that financially the Democratic Party was over the top. The $4 million debt had been paid. And if that wasn't enough good news for one day, he could relish the report he had received only 18 hours earlier. He was a grandfather. It was now Saturday, the 24th of June, in a small room in Austin, Texas.
I would like to help make a world for young Patrick Nugent and his contemporaries in every land that will be safer and will be more prosperous and more hopeful and certainly more peaceful by far than the world that I have inhabited. So working together, and reasoning together, planning together, and being patient, understanding together, I believe that we can achieve such a world.
On Monday, April 3rd, President Cevdet Sunay of Turkey arrived in Washington for a two-day round of talks with President Johnson. On their agenda, a review of Turkey's economic development, a look at the Greek and Turkish conflict on the island of Cyprus, and an evaluation of the role played by both countries in the NATO Defense Alliance. At Punta del Este, as at other recent summit meetings in the Philippines and at Guam, the world had an opportunity to observe a significant change in presidential diplomacy. Although the realities of his country's economic and military power seemingly made it impossible for Lyndon Johnson to be one among equals, his personal approach and distinctive style in the conference halls had made him a true partner. Always recognized as a superb political technician, he had accomplished more by saying less and by listening. In the post-war years, the correct diplomatic stance for a conference-bound president was considered that of a benevolent benefactor or provider. Now the style was being changed. Perhaps in its own way, the change was a tribute to the success of United States foreign policy since World War II. A policy that encouraged the free nations of the world to reach out for dignity, diversity, and individuality. A policy that had spawned one of the unparalleled economic success stories of all time, the Republic of West Germany. On April 19th, the government at Bonn announced the death of the first Chancellor of West Germany, Konrad Adenaur.
There must have been times that you wished that this cup might pass from you, that it might have come in some other place, at some other time, or to some other generation. But it didn't. It came here, and it's with us now. You've taken it with courage that makes all of your countrymen proud of you. And I pray that you will be strengthened this Christmas Day in wartime by the love of your loved ones and your people, by the great confidence that you are inspiring in other people, and by your own great steadfast courage. Now may God bless you, and may God keep each of you.
On December 23rd, for the second time in less than 14 months, the president had come to South Vietnam. And in that spirit, President Johnson called in the Republican leadership and personally briefed them on his message. Senate Republican leader Everett Dirksen had been hospitalized, but the GOP was ably represented by Minority Leader Representative Gerald Ford. Following a particularly fruitful and friendly discussion, the president stopped to admire the congressman's tie clasp. Not to be outdone, he showed off his own clasp with the gold initials LBJ. He told the GOP leader that he could have it, providing he wore it to work. Then he was back to business, for his message was scheduled for broadcast in a matter of hours. Although he would continue to change a phrase here, a word there, right up to the moment of delivery, for all practical purposes, the message was complete, his proposals locked in. All that remained now was getting advance copies to the press.
I have come once again to this chamber, the home of our democracy, to give you, as the Constitution requires, information of the state of the Union.
To an underprivileged child, a trip to the circus can bring the excitement and happiness of a storybook world come to life. During March, some of Washington's business and civic leaders helped provide that experience at a special performance of Ringling Brothers Barnum and Bailey Circus. The First Lady, who is national chairman of Project Head Start, played hostess to the group, which included many Head Start boys and girls. There had been few weeks like it in American history. A president had stepped out of the political arena in an election year. Then came the hope and elation over the promise of a new peace offensive. And now, just as suddenly, a great Negro leader was dead, and there was sorrow and despair over the burning and looting in the streets.
Once again, the heart of America is heavy for a tragedy that denies the very meaning of our land. The life of a man who symbolized the freedom and faith of America has been taken. But it is the fiber and the fabric of the republic that's being tested. And no words of mine can fill the void of the eloquent voice that has been stilled.
As the smallest member of the Johnson family, little Lynn Nugent soon found out that Easter Sunday meant bunny rabbits, other children, a short but abortive walk with his grandmother, and a horseback ride, courtesy of his constant companion, the President of the United States. The diplomatic deadlock over a site for the peace talks was finally broken. The North Vietnamese had revealed a willingness to talk, but only on their terms and at places where all the advantages would be theirs, such as Warsaw, Phnom Penh, or Burma. But the President, who had already offered at least 15 locations, had stood firm for a conference site that would be acceptable to both sides. And the American negotiators Averell Harriman and Cyrus Vance would face a communist delegation headed by Xuan Thuy in the French capital. But the war did not end with the start of talks at the Avenue Kléber. Clark Clifford, Secretary of Defense, CIA Director Richard Helms, General McConnell from the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Walt Rostow, the President's Special Assistant, these were some of the security advisors who worked with the President in meeting the enemy's newest combat challenge, Red for Blood in May. It was Hanoi's jungle password, a promise of new bloodshed and terror. It was a communist version of the old Prussian dictum of von Clausewitz: war is a continuation of diplomacy by other means. By the close of spring 1968, the First Lady had logged nearly 150,000 miles, journeying from one end of the country to the other, encouraging Americans to rediscover the beauty and heritage that lay within the nation's boundaries. Such was the theme of this month's Women's Doers Luncheon at the White House.
Thank you, Ms. Edmondson. That was a stirring, moving speech. I'm being interrupted. He is a friend of mine.
I'm glad that Ms. Johnson has taken the leadership and seeing the country herself. She sees more of it than I want her to see, because the more she sees the country, the less she sees of me. I came here today not just to see you, see America through you and to thank you, but to have a chance to see her again.
And the monsoon weather had begun, limiting the flow of men and supplies into the South. On hearing this information, the President turned to General Abrams and asked, "Can we proceed with a bombing halt without taking additional casualties? Yes, sir, the general replied. In my opinion, we can. Then the president put the same question to General Abrams he had asked General Momeyer 6 days earlier. If you were president, what would you do? While the others at the table listened intently, the general answered, Mr. President, I am really no judge of your responsibilities in that office, but I can say that I have absolutely no reservations about doing this. I think the war is at the stage where it is the right and proper thing to do. And so the president had the answer he had been seeking.
It was our first Christmas in the White House, a moment to catch and hold. It seemed to underscore my feeling that this house is only on loan to its tenants, that we are temporary occupants linked to a continuity of presidents who have come before us and who will succeed us. For only a brief time, we serve as the extension of 200 million people, holding that trust, working to fulfill it.
The man who sits in this chair sits in the chair that's been occupied by less than 40 men in the long history of this great republic. He is selected by the will and by the votes of a majority of the citizens of this republic. He must execute the philosophy and the policies of the people of this nation, regardless of his own personal feelings from time to time. He is the executor of the will of the people of this nation, and he carries upon his shoulders day and night a burden that always seems, at least to him, too much to carry, but only for him to carry.
Looking to lift off at 0.
In October, President Johnson, like millions of others, tuned in on the Apollo 7 space launch from Cape Kennedy. The drama of this attempt was heightened by the knowledge that it was America's first manned flight since the tragic death of 3 astronauts 21 months before.
12, 11, 10, 9. Ignition sequence start. 5, 4. We have ignition. All engines are running. We have liftoff. We have liftoff. It's been cleared. Top.
Roger, Jack. Tower clear 15 seconds out. The pitch and roll program are in.
As the towering Saturn 1B rocket rose into the skies, America's hopes for placing men on the moon rose with it. To the president, who for many years had worked diligently to build and expand the nation's space potential, the successful launch of Apollo 7 was a moment of great pride and excitement.
Accordingly, I shall not seek and I will not accept the nomination of my party for another term as your president. But let men everywhere know, however, that a strong and a confident and a vigilant America stands ready tonight to seek an honorable peace and stands ready tonight to defend an honored cause, whatever the price, whatever the burden, whatever the sacrifice that duty may require. Thank you for listening. Good night, and God bless all of you.